Hey there, and welcome back to VHS Crazy. When I first started this series, I said it might take a year, and I was kind of joking then, but here it is. It's already February. I started this series last February, so technically it has been a year. I'm going to try and get more of these coming out. I'm going to try and finish all these 47 movies before next February. Today's little VHS treat is Oliver Stone's classic portrayal of countercultural debauchery in The Doors. Let's get right on VHS Crazy.
Hello, popcorn delivery.
Put a little weekend in your week. Rent a video.
So, Oliver Stone's The Doors. I was first introduced to this movie, much like how I was introduced to Cape Fear, by a sketch on the Ben Stiller Show. I gotta make a video about the Ben Stiller Show sometime because it seems like the Ben Stiller Show has a sketch about like every 90s movie, and the sketch that references The Doors is called Oliver Stone Land, and the idea is that Oliver Stone starts his own theme park like Disneyland, but it's exclusively for Oliver Stone films, which is pretty funny because the idea behind the sketch is that Oliver Stone movies are technically as inaccurate and kind of wish fulfillment-ish as Disney movies, which I can certainly agree with to an extent.
Inspired by my hit film The Doors is a feverishly psychotic maze called Mr. Morrison's Wild Ride. It's an enhanced trip through depression, self-delusion, and crazed egomania.
Platoon and Born on the 4th of July are really boring movies, and Oliver Stone isn't a director I especially respect. But I think The Doors is probably his best movie, just because the source material is very interesting. I think the life of Jim Morrison is an interesting subject to tackle, because prior to this, of course, there really was no biopic about The Doors. I think, Jim Morrison is one of those rock stars who really, died pretty young, all things considered. You know, he was kind of the proto Kurt Cobain. He just kicks the bucket way before his time. So The Doors kind of handles that subject matter, and it's mostly about Jim Morrison. Obviously, it doesn't really focus on the rest of the bunch. I would say this is overall a pretty decent rock biopic. I already did one on La Bamba, and I've seen Bohemian Rhapsody, and rock biopics are a very popular genre, have been for decades. It's always interesting and fun to see the rise and fall of rock legends portrayed on film. Val Kilmer, of course, is the main highlight of the movie because his performance as Jim Morrison is just so convincing. I think this is Val Kilmer on the front here, but he looks so much like Jim Morrison, it's hard to even tell. He just looks so much like Jim Morrison. And it's not just that he's a really good method actor. It's that his voice sounds a lot like Jim Morrison, and the facial structure. The facial structure is also there.
Penetrate the evening that the city sleeps too high.
Given that this movie was in development hell for most of the 1980s, I find it pretty crazy how cohesive a product it is. It's really a very well-structured movie. I guess just because, Oliver Stone, despite making not great movies, he is the kind of director who, if he gets some good subject material and, really good cast, he can kind of put together a chronological, story with beats and everything, and it works pretty well. The cinematography in this, I would say, is its main selling point. It's got a lot of trippy sequences, the desert sequence, and the bit where the bit near the end where Jim Morrison goes completely wacko at this giant fire fest, this giant, this giant blazing crazy. The cinematography is just really good. I also like the color palette this movie goes with. There's both lighting and color correction, which makes this movie possibly the most orange movie of all time. It's a very orangey and red movie. Besides Val Kilmer, we got Meg Ryan as Pamela Morrison. I think her performance is pretty good. This is definitely one of her best roles. I like her in the Tom Hanks films, of course. She plays really well off Tom Hanks. But on the other hand, I do think she does look a lot like Pamela Morrison, so that works out. She definitely, you know, and the best parts are the parts with Jim Morrison's, problems with, marital problems and will they, won't they, and it's kind of like, the parts with Meg Ryan are probably the best scenes. And then also you have Crispin Glover as Andy Warhol, which I think is kind of interesting. I saw the Basquiat movie. It was like about Basquiat, and in that David Bowie is Andy Warhol. But I kind of like Crispin Glover's take on Andy Warhol more. He's kind of more like quaint and creaky and like neurotic.
I could talk to God with it, but I don't have anything to say.
They're both really good, but I kind of think Crispin Glover kind of works as Andy Warhol. You have Billy Idol. I forget who Billy Idol was because he was only in like a little bit of it, and I don't know who Billy Idol was. Kyle MacLachlan, Frank Whaley, Kevin Dillon as the other Doors, and then you got one lady who's like a witch, and she like seduces Jim Morrison with this witchcraft or something, and then Meg Ryan comes in, and she's like, oh, this movie, I guess, it paints Jim Morrison as this like sex-crazed drunk, and I guess he really wasn't. Like, this movie is very inaccurate, lots of historical inaccuracies. I can excuse that. It's a fun movie if you kind of accept it as like a work of fiction. Like, this isn't actually how Jim Morrison was. It's kind of just like a fictionalized retelling of Jim Morrison's life. It's not, you're not supposed to watch this and go, oh yeah, this is how actual history was. All said though, the sets and costumes are really good and period accurate. And I can pretty much buy that this is like, the 60s, or like the sets, the concert halls and the equipment and everything. It's very period accurate, so I do like that. I also like I said, the color palette. And probably the worst part of this movie is a part where they're in New York, right? And they're at this party that's being thrown by Andy Warhol. It's a part where Crispin Glover is Andy Warhol. But before that, Nico comes out. And Nico is played by this lady who's like, not at all like Nico. Like, she's putting on this cheesy German accent, and it's like, she's like Zsa Zsa Gabor. She's not like Nico. So I just find this part like totally crazy. Like, you're watching this intense biopic with Jim Morrison going on these intense desert quests, and Val Kilmer really like channels Jim Morrison. He's so good in this. He's like, his performance as Jim Morrison is like spot on. And then like Nico comes out, and it's like, that's not Nico. Like, come on. I know how Nico looks, Like, she first off, the lady they got to play Nico, the hairstyle's all wrong. Nico's hair is like straight, and the accent is terrible, like I said. Oh, it's so bad. The Nico impersonator, because they got like the Ed Sullivan impersonator. I think it's the same Ed Sullivan impersonator from like the Billy Joel music video Tell Her About It. He's really good. He really looks and sounds like Ed Sullivan, and Crispin Glover really looks and sounds like Andy Warhol. I can totally buy that. I just don't know how like Oliver Stone didn't get like how Nico looked or like sounded, because this girl that got to play Nico is completely wrong. Like, she's off the rails. And this is a big problem in a biopic, Like, everyone says this isn't like the most historically accurate. She's like a knockoff Nico. She's like Noco or something, like an off-brand generic Nico. She's a knockoff Nico. And then there's the part where they go back to Jim Morrison's hotel room, or maybe it's Nico's hotel room, I don't know. And Nico gets Nako. That never happened. And then like Meg Ryan comes in, she's like, oh, Jim, oh God. And they're having sex, and this never happened as far as I can tell. So I'm like, is Oliver Stone just making all this stuff up? Is he just like, he's just making this stuff up. It's just like a fan fiction. You're just like, oh yeah, Jim Morrison and Nico going at it. Yeah, you know, Nico had like some class. Jim Morrison, this movie paints Jim Morrison as some kind of sex magnet or something. Women just like fling themselves at him, you know. And I don't know, he's pretty hot. Val Kilmer is a very attractive guy, obviously, but I really doubt Nico would like, you know, just like go that crazy on, you know. Nico has class, but the Nico lady they got in this is so fake, and then she has sex with him. From what I can tell, this never happened. So I think Oliver Stone's, and especially like Pamela Morrison, didn't just walk in on that. For whatever reason, the scene where Jim Morrison locks her in the closet and sets the closet on fire, and then she has to like escape before it burns her up. That's the part everyone always says is historically inaccurate. But like the Nico part, that's even more fake. Like the Nico they got is not. She's a knockoff Nico. She's fake-o. What else? The soundtrack, obviously, is great. At the part where they're at the Andy Warhol party, there's some Velvet Underground songs, and you got the Doors songs, and Hang On Sloopy's in here. That one, obviously, is a classic, inspiring, you know, One Direction's What Makes You Beautiful, as well as Summer Nights from Greece. I really like Hang On Sloopy. Yeah, really good soundtrack, but, I mean, that's inevitable when you're talking about one of the greatest rock bands of all time, the Flipping Doors. I also like the dichotomy this movie draws between the West Coast vibes of the Doors and the East Coast vibes of the Velvet Underground. I think that's kind of interesting. I find it kind of funny, like when they're at the party, one of the Doors is like to Jim Morrison, hey, you know, these people are freaks and vampires. And
Come on, Jim, this isn't our scene, man. These people are vampires.
then later on, Jim Morrison actually becomes like a way bigger freak than the Velvet Underground could ever hope to be. The Doors obviously takes a lot of liberties with that kind of thing. I really doubt Jim Morrison was that nuts, but you know, it's kind of fun to imagine him like this. The same way Elvis wasn't probably how we remember him. You know, the same way like no rock star is really as big as we remember them, but like, you know, for what it's worth, I think this movie does do Jim Morrison's life justice, even if it kind of paints him as a little crazier and a little more drunk and a little more wacky than he actually was. Like, I think Val Kilmer just really carries the script. Like, Oliver Stone co-wrote the script, so the script isn't like that good, but Val Kilmer just completely embodies Jim Morrison to the point where you can't hate Val Kilmer as Jim Morrison. He's just really good. Meg Ryan is also great. She's really like, I mean, I guess it doesn't make any sense that while Jim Morrison is having so many affairs and stuff with flippin' Nico, and like, you know, why would she stay with him? Like, you know, but like, obviously it didn't happen in real life. This movie really like exaggerates. There's some quotes here. One hell of a ride, blasts your ears and scorches your eyes, says the Los Angeles Times. That it does. It's a very like sensory overload type movie. It might be a movie you watch when you're high. You know, it's a very like, it's very loud, in your face type movie with a ton of like visuals and stuff. 4 stars, says Gannett Newspapers. Oliver Stone's finest hour. The Doors opens the mind and then blows it away. Like I said, very transcendent type movie. You watch this, it's kind of an experience. Spectacular filmmaking, staggering performance by Val Kilmer, says Joel Siegel from Good Morning America. I do agree with that to an extent. It says, Jim Morrison, one of the most sensual and exciting figures in the history of rock and roll, explodes on the screen in The Doors, the electrifying movie about a time called the 60s and a legendary outlaw who rocked America's consciousness forever. I would agree with that in that the Doors are a much more interesting and influential band than the Beatles. I like how this movie never mentions the Beatles once, just says, you didn't contribute anything to music history, so screw off, you know. It just completely ignores the British invasion and focuses on American rock and roll, in particular the dichotomy between the Doors and Velvet Underground. I think the Rolling Stones are brought up at one point too, but not the Beatles. I think that's interesting. That's an interesting angle to take. This is not a movie about the British invasion of the 60s, the Kinks and whatnot. This is about the American rock and roll of the 60s. And I would agree to an extent that the two biggest figures in that are Velvet Underground and the Doors, having kind of an East Coast, West Coast psychedelic rock battle. In the same way that decades later there'd be the East Coast, West Coast rap battle. Back in the 60s, it was the same, but with psychedelic rock. I think that's kind of interesting. It really captures the differences between like the Doors' approach and Velvet Underground's approach. Velvet Underground isn't a big player in this movie, but I think it is. That's probably the best part, like the Andy Warhol bit, but not Nico. The Nico she's so fake. They did Nico wrong, and that's such a shame considering, like, you know, not that the Velvet Undergrounds with Nico are the best. Like, obviously the ones without are better, and Maureen Tucker completely carries the band on her own, but, you know, like, at least get a convincing Nico, you know? So yeah, I think The Doors is a very interesting biopic, and, while not the most accurate, it definitely does capture the vibes that the Doors were going for with their cool red and orange and kind of southwesty aesthetic. And I find the bit about, you know, how like Jim Morrison sees like this Indian shaman dying when he's young, and then like he hallucinates this Indian guy throughout his whole life, and then like, you know, it's very like cheesy and overblown, but you know, it's entertaining. I do like it.
Come on! How many of you people know you're alive?
The concert scenes are also really cool, and then there's a bit where you know, Jim Morrison like talks in trash about the police, and he's like, "This cop maced me, man," and then he gets like kicked out, and the show ends, and the cops like carry him out in handcuffs. Can you imagine a Beatles concert ending like that? Like, seriously, I sure can. Yeah, I do like how this movie just does not mention the Beatles at all, you know, because the Doors are like 1,000 times cooler and more rock and more like, you know, good music, you know, just plain and simple. This is not a movie about the Beatles here. This is a movie about the Doors, and it really gets that down pat. Who else is in this? Not too many other, like I said, Crispin Glover's really good. You know, the bit where Jim Morrison gets the beard at the end and he puts on a little bit of weight, that's pretty convincing. I like how it makes him look fatter and like, you know, more washed up. The movie is also interesting in that it deals with the commercialization and commodification of rock. There's the bit where Jim Morrison sees a commercial on the TV with Light My Fire. It's like a really stupid beer commercial. He's like, "This shit stinks. You guys put our song in a commercial without me?" And the band's like, "Well, we don't think it's that bad. Like, we just put in a commercial." And he like throws the TV against the wall because he's an artiste and he doesn't have any time for this. You know, he can't stand his song being in a commercial. Again, probably didn't happen in real life, but it's fun. It's the commercial's pretty funny. It has Light My Fire in it. So yeah, this movie does talk a lot about the like commodification of rock music, which I find kind of ironic for a movie starring Billy Idol. I know, applause. The Doors is pretty long. It's on the long end. It's 138 minutes. It really drags on with the slow devolvement of Jim Morrison's mental state. We start out, you know, with him being this like young college kid, and he's, you know, just like, you know, really hot and young, and then he devolves into this bearded tub of lard who's on all kinds of drugs and excess. This movie is kind of about hedonism. It's kind of about, It's just like satisfying yourself too much with drugs and women and sex and food and all concerts and venues, and oh my gosh, he goes off the deep end.
I'm gonna get my kicks before the whole shithouse goes up in flames.
Again, probably didn't happen in real life, but yeah, the movie drags on. There's like 5 different points where you think, oh, is he gonna die? Like he's on the ledge. Oh my gosh, he's gonna jump off. But no, wait, he didn't die. Then he's at the concert. Is he gonna jump off and die? No, he's still alive. Wait, hang on, just one more scene. But when he does die, it's kind of satisfying. It's the end of the story. The inevitable result. The Thanksgiving scene, which is in here, did not happen. We know that for a fact. Confirmed. Never happened. There was never a point where Meg Ryan is slinging sweet potatoes onto Val Kilmer with a spoon, being like, "Oh, you filthy animal,"
Bastard, you killed my duck!
Because it's not like Jim Morrison would probably invite this lady he was cheating on to the Thanksgiving thing anyway, because why would he do that? It's just create tension. You really don't like he cheats way too much. I doubt Jim Morrison cheated that much. I think The Doors is an interesting case. It kind of shows what a rock biopic can be when it's not so concerned with accuracy. Bohemian Rhapsody is a pretty accurate retelling of Freddie Mercury and Queen, and it doesn't paint Freddie Mercury as more crazy than he really was. It's very grounded, I guess you could say. But this is just oh, Jim Morrison, he was this legendary. It practically paints him like flipping Paul Bunyan, just like an American tall tale. He was so just crazy and oh, he was in another state, Oh my gosh, Jim Morrison, I think that's kind of interesting, the case where Oliver Stone obviously had to get the rights to tell the story from the remaining Doors and everything, but he just really didn't pay any attention to how the actual story was, and as a result what we get is really fictionalized, really out there account that just does not pay any attention to what actually happened. It's fun, it is entertaining, and Val Kilmer really is giving it his best. He's really trying to look and sound and just act like Jim Morrison. It's very convincing, all of it. Yeah, cinematography is great. Acting for the most part is great. Just the script that's kind of what was Oliver Stone really thinking here? What was he going off with this? When all's said and done, and like I said, the soundtrack is really, really solid. There's just Doors hits throughout. Riders on the Storm, The End, all the classics, all the Doors' biggest hits. This case, I think this is a re-release from something called Coralco Home Video. So this isn't one of the original VHSs, because it came out in 1991, but this is from 1996, the design. It's a little older, and it also says Avid Home Entertainment on the sides, so I guess this particular VHS was released by 2 different kind of home video companies, which are different from movie studios. I think that's pretty interesting. On the one side here you have Val Kilmer as Jim Morrison, and on the other here you have Meg Ryan as Pam. Like I said, probably one of Meg Ryan's best performances. It's surprisingly good. I like her in Joe versus the Volcano, but she's a good dramatic actress too. The parts with them and the tension is the most interesting. Anywho, so yeah, that said, what do I rate The Doors? Am I gonna, what am I gonna rate this? It's been a long time since I rated a VHS, so bear with me here. What am I gonna rate The Doors? Oliver Stone's The Doors. 4 stars. 4 stars. Not 5 stars. I'd probably give it 5 stars if it was more accurate. to be honest, I don't mind most of the inaccuracies. I don't mind the bit where he lights the closet on fire. I don't mind the Thanksgiving scene. I don't really care. It's entertaining. What I do mind is Nico. Fake Nico knocks it down a star. Because Nico, that guy is so fake. She's totally not Nico.
That's alright. You can get on, you little lizard king. At Oliver Stone land, we question authority.
So that's why it gets 4 stars, not 5. You know, it's a fun movie. I would suggest watching it, but I can't in good conscience be like, oh yeah, this is the best, you know, rock biopic. It's so good. Did I give La Bamba 5 stars? I forget. I mean, La Bamba is better than this. Don't get me wrong, but The Doors, for what it's worth, is, you know, a pretty like psychedelic, trippy, fun. You know, it's a fun movie, I guess. That's the best way to describe it. It's really fun, but if you're looking for accuracy, if you're looking for like an actual account of Jim Morrison's life, probably isn't ever going to get made. So just listen to a Doors album for a more accurate account of Jim Morrison's life, because nobody can tell Jim Morrison's story better than Jim himself. That said, 4 stars, because fake Nico, and I think this movie could do way better with just getting better actors to play Nico. Like, it's not that hard to get an accurate Nico. Just not this, like, fake, like, blonde portrayed as a bimbo. And Nico is, like, very, very, like, classy and, like, high taste and, like Oliver Stone clearly knows nothing about Nico or, like, her whole deal. Like, this is so dumb. Anyways, yeah, 4 stars. That's my review of The Doors. I'm going to try and watch more VHSs up in the weeks ahead, but I'll be honest, I enjoyed The Doors. I enjoyed watching The Doors. Fun movie. Better than most things made these days. Although I can't say, I hope Oliver Stone makes more movies, because, like, he's pretty boring, forgettable director, and he takes so many, like, you know, liberties with what he shows and doesn't show, and, you know, he's just kind of a slimy grease ball. I wish Oliver Stone land was real. That'd be fun. That'd be incredible. So that said, that's today's installment of VHS Crazy. I'll be making more of these very soon. I promise. I guarantee it. I'm trying to finish these 47 VHS tapes as quick as possible. We're already up to the 30s. That said, that's it for this week. Sayonara, suckers.
So come and enjoy the distortion of reality that is Oliver Stone land!